Okay, guys, alternate ending. Take 43.
With so many movies on the net and TV, it's kind of hard being up and film savvy. Do you catch a show while you're on the go? And how do you know what to keep or what to throw? How do you know what to keep or what to throw? Tune in to alternate ending. Tune in to alternate ending. Tune in to alternate ending. Tune in to alternate ending now. Please give a warm welcome to the hosts of Alternate Ending.
Welcome to Alternate Ending, where we're discovering good movies, one bad movie at a time. I'm your host, critic in resident, Tim Brayton. We have a very special episode for you this week. Rob and Carrie, my usual co-hosts, are not with us right now. They're on a family vacation, enjoying this August time away from podcast and other travails and just enjoying time with their children. Instead, I'll be joined this week by our man in California and cinematic trash compactor, Brennan Klein, and our woman in Florida and Razzie's correspondent, Mandy Albert. Brennan, Mandy, welcome.
Howdy.
Hello. How you guys doing?
Thank you so much for having me.
I'm so excited to be here on this special Bride of Alternate Ending takeover of the entire podcast.
I mean, that's essentially what's going on. Although, in theory, we're not talking about horror. In theory,
That's a funny theory that you have.
It is the theory that I am living with right now. It's a sort of nebulous concept. It's a concept that I won't lie, I felt more comfortable introducing in a world where Carrie was not going to be on the episode, because I think that would have been a disaster of such epic proportions that I now feel bad depriving those of you listening to this episode of it.
That would have been incredible.
It would have been. Maybe we'll do a sequel. Maybe we'll come back to this. But we are currently in between the limited release and the wide release of Bodies, a new film by A24, whose entire thing, as near as I can tell, is, hey, there's an internet out there, and there's, like, extremely online people. And we're also not that far removed from the release of Jordan Peele's Nope, and Jordan Peele is certainly a filmmaker whose interest is, like, how does, society work, the days in which we live. So we're doing our top 5 films about the Zeitgeist. So films that sort of pull... Well, we'll talk about that. We'll talk about what the hell that phrase means. But before we get into that, typically we have our little banter time, and usually Rob has a very good way of segueing into that. I clearly don't. But Brennan, I think you had some banter.
Yes, I shall insert banter here. Yes, no, my day has been really wild. As you two can see on the Zoom call, I am recording from a teenage girl's bedroom, and that is my younger sister's childhood room. Lots of Taylor Swift memorabilia is adorning the walls around me. So if you're feeling a very Swiftian energy today, that's where it's coming from.
I was just going to assume you were a big Taylor Swift fan. I was going to say nothing and judge no one.
I'm not.
I was going to do one half of those things.
I am Swift agnostic for the most part. Nothing against or for in particular. But
I will say, before I let you back to your
Sure.
story, the Taylor Swift original written for the film Where the Crawdads Sing, I actually kind of like.
That makes
Wow.
fun of us.
It kind of got us back to, like, I liked when Taylor Swift was doing country music, and I got really bummed out when she switched over to pop, and it felt like she was kind of going back to it a tiny bit.
I guess. I don't know. I just couldn't take it out of the context.
Well, the context is bad.
yeah, and there.
It's a bad movie.
But you are grading on the scale of songs written for movies, which is a subgenre that encourages artists to create their very worst work most of the time.
That is true.
I mean, let us be clear. The worst thing Beyonce has ever put her name to was attached to The Lion King. So, like, it is a form that kills good artists.
Absolutely.
But you are, as you said, you've taken over a teenage girl's house or something like that.
Yeah, something like that.
Is the teenage girl currently being fed, or have you just gagged her?
The teenage girl is currently in her 20s, but the room is still very teenage. And the teenage girl is actually much closer to Mandy than she is to me geographically. Anyway, so I went to my car this morning to go run some errands, and turns out that somebody with a crowbar of some kind has been going around smashing car windows in my neighborhood this week. So it was my turn. My ticket got pulled. It was the Shirley Jackson lottery. One of my side windows was just smashed in. Nothing was stolen because, folks, I do podcasts. I don't have anything.
I was going to say, you are a part-time podcaster and part-time writer for a clickbait site, so I would not imagine you have too much money to
Yeah, not entirely. So, speaking of not having much money, the cheapest mechanic that I know is the one in my hometown, which is about a 30-minute drive from where I live. So thank you to my mom who picked me up and brought me to...
So by California standards, a 30-minute drive is about $2,
yeah,
right?
Basically.
Okay.
So thank you to my mom who picked me up, and I am currently recording stranded at my childhood home. I'm in my sister's bedroom because my room is now a gym that does not have a desk in it.
All right.
But driving here on the freeway with a shattered window was a really interesting kind of action movie experience. What happened was that the bottom half of my window was taken out, but the top half was still hanging in there with this like spider web of cracks and just kind of clinging to the frame.
Ooh.
So as I was driving, anytime I would speed up or hit a bump, another shard of glass would just kind of propel itself into my back seat. Until
Brennan,
Are you okay?
at what point did you think I will pull over to the side of the road, wrap my arm in a jacket, and break the rest of this glass?
Well, once I hit the freeway,
before it slices my eyeballs out.
It's that car glass that's like gummy and weird. So I was like, I'll probably be
I still
fine.
don't want it hitting your eyeball at 70 miles an hour on the California.
No, it was the window behind me, for the record, and
So somebody
Okay.
else's eyeball.
Okay.
That's fine.
Yeah, exactly. And I was driving with sunglasses on, as I always do, so I was very protected. Also, I wore a mask, so I wouldn't be breathing in any sort of shards of any kind.
Okay.
But it felt like I was in a bad Roland Emmerich movie where you're like outrunning something ridiculous. And it was really starting.
There are
and it
worse
was a very
places you could be than a bad Roland Emmerich movie. If you gotta
That's
go,
true.
that's a good way to go.
It could be in a bad Michael Bay
Exactly.
movie.
At least this way I can maybe get to meet Jake Gyllenhaal, which is my dream.
I have a very stupid Michael Bay connection.
Okay,
Which
tell
is
me.
that Michael...
There's no
Please.
such other thing.
It's true, which is that Michael Bay is my fraternity brother. And once I attempted to
All right.
use this connection, when I was very young and even more foolish, to ask Michael Bay for a job.
Did it work?
It did not.
I mean, you gotta work whatever angle
It's true.
shows up, you know.
But yeah,
Anyway, are we at the end of banter?
I was gonna say I don't have. Well, are we at the end of banter? Have we hit banter o'clock
I've watched
yet?
some god-awful movies the last couple days.
I mean,
Speaking
you've
of
written about one of these god awful movies for
I
our
have, so I
website.
won't say too much about that one, but prior to that, I watched the other half of what I've been referring to as the Zoomer double feature from hell, which was They/Them, which...
I have not had the pleasure yet, but I wish very much to. I know you've both seen They/Them.
Indeed.
And I wish to be given the full. Brennan's take, I saw on Letterboxd, Brennan is measured in his dislike of They/Them. He gave it 2 stars.
I saw that.
So I want the good stuff. Tell me about
Oh
They/Them,
my.
Mandy.
Well, how much do you want me to tell you about it? Like, is this a...
I mean, it is not a spoiler safe space because imagine some of
Okay.
our listeners are more sensitive to that kind of
I
thing
see.
than I am.
In that case, there is something that I feel like I could tell you about it that may in fact persuade you to just skip it.
Oh, those things never
Fair
persuade
enough.
me to skip it.
And
That's hard to hit for Tim.
And
That's
actually,
a tiny.
this does not reveal any plot points, so I'm going to go ahead and call it not a spoiler, and if anybody wants to yell at me later, they can. But it is a slasher in which all of the kills happen off-screen.
Oh, that might have persuaded me to skip it.
Yeah, it is. I was telling Tim. I mean, I'm writing the review for Alternate Ending, so that's gonna
good.
come out in the next couple days, so you can get the full thought. So I
Ooh,
won't
excellent.
like go super deep into it. But it is a movie that is it is two completely different movies, and the one that it is being sold on is such an incompetent farrago. It's not okay.
I was like, best case scenario, this is going to be a new generation sleepaway camp, so like sleepaway camp for annoying Zoomers, and it was very much almost the opposite of that. In that sleazaway camp.
I mean, your Freudian slip has been noted and approved.
In the sleazaway camp, yes. Sleepaway camp is just like sleazy and rotten and ugly and likes itself that way to its core, whereas They/Them is very, very concerned with not really upsetting anybody, because upsetting people makes us feel bad.
Mm-hmm.
I don't like slasher movies that are nice at all.
But yeah,
Oopsie.
between that and not okay, I don't like movies anymore.
You know, I respect that.
But
Clearly.
all of those movies, They/Them, Not Okay, and the upcoming Bodies, they all seem to have something to say about the zeitgeist, don't they, Tim?
I
Don't
should
they
say
just?
they do. They are talking about the world in which we live.
The world in which someone lives, presumably.
The world in which some film executive believes that people who use Tumblr live. But yes, so yeah, they are going to all tell us about that, and we're going to talk about that. But before we talk about that, we have boilerplate show elements to get through, if I'm not mistaken.
Ooh, yay.
Man with the script.
Oh my god, Tim.
Brennan.
I mean, yeah, but like, you could that part, you know what's going on. We're gonna talk about how we formulated our lists and whatnot, presumably.
Do we talk about that
Yeah.
now?
What
we
do you
talk
mean?
about that now. I'm remembering how we used to do top 5 episodes like
I was gonna say,
2
Tim,
years
you
ago.
recorded
Oh.
how many episodes of this podcast?
I just listen to Rob's voice yammering on, and when it stops, I make jokes at Carrie, and that's what I do on this podcast.
Got it. Okay, so yes, I do have the script, but yeah, ad break comes later now. But we'll get to that. Stay
Okay.
tuned.
Remember how there was an episode where Carrie and I had a 5-minute argument about whether or not we'd already had the ad break? I am clearly not good with this part of the show.
Well, remember the part where you were like, "I'm going to take the wheel at the beginning."
And I did.
figured this
and
was
then,
still the beginning.
And then I was... No, the beginning was me kicking it over after I introduced the two of you, because we wanted to make sure that you, our listeners, weren't confused. Boy, did we fuck that one
Also,
up.
we've been talking for like 10 minutes. It's way too soon for ads.
Yeah. Anyway,
It is, well, I don't know.
so the zeitgeist.
Zeitgeist.
The Zeitgeist.
I think there.
German for spirit of the times.
I think there's a lot of different ways to approach this topic, and I'm curious which ones you went with. So, Tim, how did you formulate this list? Like, kind of what criteria were you working with?
So, I think there is a distinction to be made, and since the films we're talking about are Bodies, and They, Them, and Not Okay, and Nope, and DC League of Super Pets, and God knows what else. We're talking about films that are very self-consciously looking at the world and saying, what's going on in the world? I want some of that, and I want some of that, and I'm going to put them into my movie, and I'm going to make a plot out of it. And that is one way of being about the zeitgeist, and that's the way I've chosen. To me, there's also films that sort of get into what's going on. And the example that leaps to mind for me, there's several just from the career of this director. But in 1993, there was a point in time when people were like, oh, dinosaurs, those are cool. And there was a point in time in the same calendar year when everyone in the world thought dinosaurs were the best thing ever. And in between those 2 points was the release of Jurassic Park. And that is a film that shaped the zeitgeist. That is a film that basically said, okay, the thing you now all care about is dinosaurs. And lo and behold, we all did. Much in the way that in 2012, the Avengers said, okay, the thing you now all care about is superheroes. So I think that's a form of being a zeitgeist film, but it is not a film about the zeitgeist. It is a film that sort of becomes the zeitgeist. And I was focused more on films that are really looking at the world as it exists and saying, okay, we're going to try and do something with the culture we see, and we're going to be about culture. So that's half of it. That's my definition of zeitgeist. The other part is that they all had to be good, which was not easy for me. because I think films of this sort have an unusually high proclivity to be bad.
Absolutely, and we've talked about this before. You tend to not like films that age poorly, which is kind of how these are designed, right?
They to a certain extent are, and I do think I came up with 5 films that have aged well. But no, I think that in general, films that really want to be of their moment, if they succeeded, by definition, they're not of any future moment. And that's not fun for me, unless I'm just looking at them strictly as a historical document. I will say, I had one other rule for myself that was less of a criterion going in and more something I had to enforce. I gathered a list of films, I put that list of film together, I took a look at my list of films, and I realized that I had 5 movies from and about the 1960s. And I was like, well...
That's a little late for you.
That's boring. It's so late for me. That's boring as hell. So I limited myself very consciously to only some films about the 1960s.
And is your list ranked in order of quality or most zeitgeisty or...
I would probably have to go with most zeitgeisty, because by no conceivable means is my number 1 my favorite film on my list.
And for me, I drew a similar distinction that you did. I think films that shaped the zeitgeist, I tried to avoid those. There are some that are, the Venn diagram of both, but I was thinking of a film like Clueless. I think that movie shapes the zeitgeist more than it reflects it, because it caused a lot of trends to happen rather than necessarily picked up on trends that were already happening. And that one's maybe a little more borderline, so I'm sorry if that's on anyone's list. No,
that's far too new for me. I mean, the 60s were already getting close.
Yeah, so no spoilers on that, but yeah, that's kind of how I was thinking about, that's what I was thinking about when I approached mine. And mine is just organized chronologically. I did only choose movies that I liked, but the zeitgeist was the thing that was more important to me. So I just wanted to rate it by, we're going forward in time with mine. Okay. How about you, Mandy?
I also only chose movies that I liked, which was very difficult, again, because like Tim, I also don't tend to like movies that are trying to say big and important things about these times that we live in, especially since as a reflexive contrarian, I usually find myself consciously rebelling against whatever claims to be the zeitgeist. This was also, I don't know, I felt weirdly insecure about this topic, and I still feel kind of insecure about this topic because, and I think this was something that grad school did to me, it felt very weird looking at movies made before I was born or made in a different place than I'm from and being like, yes, this movie perfectly captures the spirit of this time that I did not experience and thus have no actual authority to speak on. But at some point, you just kind of have to accept your own imperfections and do your best with what you know. I basically agree with the, categories of zeitgeist of, some movies are born into the zeitgeist, some seize the zeitgeist, and some have the zeitgeist thrust upon them. And I think my list kind of spans that. I tried to kind of gear it towards, I guess, more born into the zeitgeist. I tried to look for movies that I felt like captured, sometimes without even trying to necessarily, though most of them probably tried to some degree, just something very specific about the time whence they come. So it's not necessarily capturing the entire spirit of this time, this place, this whenever, but something about it that it's this could only be from this time. And as far as the ranking goes, I was going to claim that I ranked them by how zeitgeisty they were, but looking at my list, I have absolutely ranked them by how much I like them, so we're going to go with that.
Oh, that. Yeah. So who do we want to go first? It's I'll let you, Brennan, sort of control how we go through these lists.
Okay. Well, if I'm sort of the Rob and you are the Tim, and I don't necessarily...
I can't live up to Carrie. Don't make me do that.
I was gonna say don't say that to somebody.
I don't mean to say that. But no. Okay. Well, who
is it? Is it because she's the woman?
Exactly.
We are all interchangeable.
Yeah. We.
No, I want you to finish that thought. If it's going to a good place, I can feel it.
I do have white lady face blindness, but not for people that I know personally. So you're good. You're safe.
It you squinted, I could see how you could mistake me for Carrie until we both said something.
Yeah, that voice blindness, not so much.
I was more thinking
anyway,
about the substance of what we would say.
Also,
well, that's kind of what I was implying. Also, but that was sorry. My brain is still shattered into 1,000 pieces, like my window.
It's okay, and I'm
anyway.
just reminding myself that I can never ever be Carrie.
No, and that's Carrie's uniqueness is the thing that is so special about her.
It absolutely is.
And it is impossible to try to be Carrie, so you should not. And I know you're not. But anyway, how about we start with me and then Mandy and then Tim?
Works for me.
okay.
Great.
That works for me.
Well, my first Zeitgeist film, remember we're going in chronological order with me, it's from 1954, so probably after all of Tim's films.
I know. I already told you. My thing was about the 60s.
I know. That's when culture really started to happen, you know.
I mean, to an extent, I do think it's just that there was so much Zeitgeist in the 1960s.
But yes, so this is probably the most like off-model one that I chose, but it's the original Japanese film Godzilla, directed by Honda Ishiro. It is a film about post-World War II Japan living under the shadow of the wreckage that the bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki left upon the nation in such a direct way that even the characters in the movie become aware of it before too long.
Yes, like objectively, yes. I love that if you look at film reviews written by English language critics prior to whenever it was 2001, 2002, all of them are like, I think if you tease this out and you pull at this and you look at this, Godzilla's a metaphor for the bomb. And then, for the first time, American audiences see the uncut Godzilla in the early 2000s. I forget exactly when it was. I know that I was in college. And it's like the characters are like, this giant dinosaur reminds me of the bomb. It's like, oh, that was not a metaphor. That was a symbol. Yeah. But no, it's very fascinating to me, like how somehow the American cut resulted in a film that was more subtle in its goals than the Japanese.
It seems like it's
Yeah.
almost against the spirit of Godzilla to be subtle.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Yeah. But yeah, and for those who haven't seen it, Godzilla is about a giant nuclear lizard who is woken up by nuclear testing. He destroys Tokyo. People are sad about it. But yeah, and it also brings in the early stages the Lucky Dragon 5 incident where a ship came too close to nuclear testing at the Bikini Atoll and people got radiation poisoning. So they were bringing in a contemporary thing as well, in addition to just kind of really digging their Godzilla-sized claws into this giant mushroom cloud of a metaphor. And I truly cannot understand how it could have possibly played so well in Japan at the time. It seems like an incredibly grim prospect to witness, but I'm glad it did. I love Godzilla.
I mean, the status of art about World War II and the trauma of the bomb in Japan is very weird for non-Japanese people to get a grasp on, in my experience, as someone who's had that weirdness. In general, the narrative that Japan tells itself about World War II is fascinating and difficult to like figure out. But there's a lot of it there. So to me, it is in a way that I would never expect the Germans to make the German version of Godzilla. The Japanese making the Japanese version of Godzilla is like, yeah.
I desperately want to see the German version of Godzilla now, though.
I mean, it sort of occurs to me now that I've said that there's actually a 1946 film called The Murderers Are Among Us that is kind of that, but also not really.
Yeah.
Also, there are all sorts of weird rules about, like, in both of those countries, the occupying governments, like in Germany, the Soviets let a certain kind of movie get made, the Americans let a very different certain kind of movie get made, and then in Japan, I think it's still in 1954, like the American military is giving the okay to everything produced in Japan. It might have been done by 54, but there's also that level of weirdness on top of everything else.
Yeah, it's such a deeply peculiar source for a movie like this to spring from, but it's such a goddamn perfect monster movie. It's grim and unrelenting, but it's also it's got a fun dude and a monster kicking over buildings, and
It's a
there's a
great
part
picture.
where Godzilla gets really pissed off at a clock tower, and I love it.
Yeah, it's 5 out of 5
The,
movies.
all the
It's
best
great fun.
fights in movies, as far as I'm concerned, are giant monsters versus inanimate objects.
I mean, sometimes it's giant monsters versus other
I don't know.
giant monsters,
I really prefer
Otherwise, I
giant
really do.
monsters just taking out their rage on things that can't really fight back, except when suddenly they can.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
Anyway, Mandy, what's your number 5?
What is my number 5? Which one did I decide? Yes, that one. Okay, so we're going to start for me a little bit later than that. So, quick word association game. Tell me about things that you associate with the early 90s.
Grunge?
Exactly! So,
Hey!
what else does anyone associate with the early 90s? Don't answer that question. So my first movie on the list, this is definitely a seized the zeitgeist type movie, because it is a movie shot in Seattle, basically about the grunge movement, and that is Cameron Crowe's 1992 movie Singles, which is a lovely, fluffy little romantic comedy that also stars the members of Pearl Jam basically as themselves in a band with the god-awful name of Citizen Dick, with Matt Dillon as their frontman. Matt Dillon, who really should keep his hair long more often. But the actual plot of Singles, Cameron Crowe claims that Singles inspired Friends. I have no idea whether that claim has any truth to it, nor do I particularly care, but I do definitely see the similarities there. Singles follows 4 attractive 20-somethings, or 5 attractive 20-somethings. 4 of those attractive 20-somethings are pursuing relationships in pairs with each other and trying to overcome their various, mostly male, fears of commitment. The 5th attractive 20-something is on the hunt for Mr. Right. And all of this is just set against the backdrop of all the Gen X-iness and brooding and trying to discover beauty in the early 1990s Seattle. Again, it's just a very pleasant, fun movie. I have good feelings about this movie. It's nothing to write home about. It just makes me... It's like a cup of warm cocoa for me every time I revisit it. And it is definitely one of those seizing the zeitgeist as hard as you can possibly seize it type movies, because again, the only thing that happened in the early 1990s, aside from like the first Clinton White House, was grunge. There is a scene in this movie that will never fail to make me smile that has, like, nothing to do with the rest of the movie, and it is the members of Pearl Jam watching a documentary together about how bees mate.
All right.
And it's just such a lovely little famous people sitting around doing kind of a goofy thing kind of moment. So if you were a Friends fan, or if you like rom-coms in general, and if you have any fondness for the grunge movement, which I went through a major and very ill-advised grunge phase way back when, so that was when I first saw this movie, you will enjoy Singles.
I am all 3 of those things, so I'll have to check it out.
I
I've not
think
seen
you
that
would
one.
love this movie, Brennan.
Okay, great.
It's really quite... it's very heteronormative, but it's also quite adorable.
I know how to ignore the straights
Exactly.
in a movie. It's fine.
I feel like, so I'm sure you've both heard, Gene Siskel had a very famous rule. One of the ways he would judge if a movie is worth watching is this movie more or less interesting than watching footage of the same actors having lunch together? And I now feel like a rule is this movie more or less interesting than watching the same actors watching a bee documentary? Needs to like become...
Well, as it turns out, this movie
become
is
a rule.
exactly the same level of interesting as watching those same actors watch a bee documentary.
I love that. I love that, and I love that you went straight for the 90s.
Also, did you know that bees explode when they mate?
What?
Yeah, the male bee explodes
Well,
at
now
the
I
end
do.
of mating.
Great.
Hey, so do I, you know what I mean, right? Hey,
You weren't making
Hey.
enough NC-17 rated jokes, Tim. I had to give you the opening.
I thank you. I appreciate that. No, you know, to your point that you made when you were setting out your criterion, Mandy, I think it is weird to talk about the zeitgeist in a moment you weren't from. And, you know, actually, this sort of also ties into yours, Brennan. I semi-consciously made a decision to mostly focus on not American, because as I look at my list, it's less than half American. But I felt like I couldn't really make movies about, like, countries in which I just fundamentally don't know their cultural history well enough. Like I know bits and pieces about like Japanese history, and I could like point to this or that movie and be like, aha, I know that was a Zeitgeist thing because I've read about it. But I don't know that. Like the culture isn't like in my guts. And same with chronology to a certain extent. I will say none of my films were made during my lifetime. Partially because I think the 80s Zeitgeist was uniquely ill for, like, it was bad for good movies. Like, all the really Zeitgeisty 80s movies are kind of, I think, shitty. And I'd say that's also somewhat true of the 2000s. I'd say the 90s, and I think you did a good job, sort of nailing that with Singles, that there was a Zeitgeist there. To me, did the 90s have a Zeitgeist? And like living through it as a teenager, my answer is kind of like,
there were
no
boy bands.
Really. I feel like a lot of what was going on in the 90s, especially because I was thinking about things like Reality Bites.
There was a point where the president was in trouble and nobody would tell me why.
The president was in trouble. I feel like we have now encountered one of the very precise delineations between our age, because I did not need to be told
I was
why the
8.
president was in trouble.
Nobody would tell me why the president was in trouble. My poor 3rd grade teacher.
I don't remember what age I was when all that was going down, but I got why it was naughty. But like, to me, the culture of the era was sort of like, we don't have a Zeitgeist and we're trying desperately hard to like form one, with things like Seinfeld, for example. So no 90s films on mine, no 80s films on mine, and obviously nothing more recent than that. But you know what is on mine?
What is on yours?
It's film from the Great Depression.
Ooh, of course.
Because if there's one Zeitgeist I want to just dive right into, it's the Great Depression, am I right? Because it was great.
Awesome.
And who doesn't like things that aren't great? But no. So the thing about Great Depression cinema, it's a stereotype, but it's also kind of true. It's very escapist. It's all about, like, we don't want to look at the world around us. We want to kind of pretend it's not there and just enjoy Cary Grant in suits and shit like that. But there were some films that were about, like, the hard scrabble lives of people just kind of trying to fight and make it through, which would usually be made fluffy in other ways. A lot of these were musicals. A lot of these were Broadway musicals. And in particular, the film I have in mind is Gold Diggers of 1933, which of course was released in the year 1933 and is very much about like a group of really, really poor Koreans trying to survive long enough to put a show on, basically. And I could have picked several films. I could have, in fact, picked several films from the Gold Diggers series, but the reason I picked this one in particular is because this is the film from which the song We're in the Money comes. And We're in the Money, if you ever have actually listened to the full set of lyrics, is about surviving the Depression. And it's like the one piece of pop culture from the entire decade that's basically just saying, yeah, everyone's life is shit right now.
Because it's so cheery.
And we're just going to, old man depression, you won't get through, or something like that. Like, there's definitely a line about it.
Wow.
And like, it's about having money. Like, it's not ironically saying we're in the money. It is saying that we are literally in the money. And in the movie, the chorus line is all dressed like giant pennies and doing like kicks while they're dressed as pennies. And in fact, that song was first performed by Ginger Rogers, no less. So there you go. But yeah, so that's why I picked Gold Diggers of 1933 specifically, is that it is sort of really tied into this thing that, like, a lot of people don't have money and that sucks, and let's try and get the money we can get doing whatever we need to do, basically. Hence Gold Diggers as the title.
Yeah, so it kind of...
But yeah. It's also just a really super great musical that's like fun and very well choreographed by Busby Berkeley.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's like, it's escapist, but it's about the people that you are still. It's not, it's not the Wizard of Oz, like, completely outside of...
Right, which is, there's every studio had its thing. The Warner Brothers musicals, of which the Gold Digger series was part of that, they were Warner's, they were always a little bit more about, like, the hard, down on your luck sort of life on the streets. Like 42nd Street is a Warner Brothers film, and of course 42nd Street, the number 42nd Street, is this, like, miniature epic of the horrible, grungy, impoverished lives of New York people. And so the Warner's films in particular are sort of contrasting this. We come to see this escapism. We come to watch people say witty things and dance and show off their legs and whatnot. But we're also going to sort of reflect on all the terrible things in the world around us, but, you know, do so in a way that kind of feels a little bit safer than just like straight up realism.
I have not seen this one, but 42nd Street was on my long list, and now I'm kind of wondering if it should have made my short list, but also I'm committed, so I'm not gonna. No regrets.
Fair enough. I will say, if you like 42nd Street, Gold Diggers of 1933 is
I'm very
for sure
excited to see this now.
You need to see.
Yeah, and that's a film, I watched it in a class, and let's say I was not as attentive as I could have been, but I do remember enjoying it very much, although some details have slipped from my brain.
42nd
Yeah.
Street?
No, Gold Diggers of 1933.
Oh, you did see?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Awesome. Good class.
Oh, yeah, no, my teacher was great. I was just not in the mood that day.
As a
but
teacher,
I remember
can
being...
confirm, no one actually pays full attention to things they do in class. You gotta go revisit them later.
How can you ever not be in the mood for Ginger Rogers dressed as a penny?
That year of school was very hard for me. I had a lot going on, you know, college. Anyway,
Yeah.
my number 4 is a movie that
You're number 4.
What? Oh, yeah, sorry.
I said you're number
Yeah.
4. I was agreeing with you.
My number 4 is a movie I also saw in college and did pay attention to. So it was just an off day for me in the 33. This film is from 1959. It is Gidget. Because what do teenagers love more than surfing in the late 50s and early 60s? And also, guess what? The Hays Code's kind of starting to go away a little bit. Maybe,
it's not so much that the Hays Code is going away, it's that this movie was cheap enough that the Hays Code didn't give a shit.
that too. But it's like...
That's how you get it to go away, though.
That's a good point.
But yeah, we're kind of extremely horny in this movie.
I was going to say, you asked the question, what do teenagers care about more than surfing? And
There's your answer.
And Gidget has an answer for that question.
She certainly does.
Gidget's a film.
It is.
It really is, and it's shocking when you just assume like, oh, it's a 50s movie that I'm going into, and it's an absolute delight. It's a really frothy, fun movie that kind of kicked off the whole, you know, teen beach movie thing. It stars Sandra Dee as Gidget, which is a nickname she is given for reasons that do not hold up to modern scrutiny. And she and her friends, her friends are more interested in boys than she is at the beginning of the film. She is purely interested in surfing. She wants to join this like all-male world of beach surfing culture, specifically to hang out with this guy Moondoggy, but also their kind of surfing guru, the Big Kahuna, who also a little bit of a Zeitgeist in there. He's a disillusioned Korean War veteran, which I had forgotten about before I was redoing my rereading the plot synopsis to refresh my memory. But it's such a frothy movie. It's one of the perfect surf movies out there, because surf movies can be very, very boring to me, especially the more stock footage of surfing there is. But this movie is just an absolute delight, and I obviously I can't speak to whether or not it captured something about what teenagers were doing in the 50s, but it captures something that teenagers were very into in the 50s.
And it also, I think, very clearly feels like something that square studio executive adults who were trying to be hip and with it were making. Like, this is not an organic film.
Oh no, but the pretense of it,
which I'm saying is good, because to me that's what this list
absolutely
is about. Sort of. I'm a little embarrassed this one never even crossed my mind, because one of the films on my list when it was nothing but 60s films that sadly got cut was Beach Blanket Bingo, which is one of this film's many knockoffs would be a strong word, but certainly it entered the market sector that this film created.
Mm-hmm. The Zeitgeist, perhaps.
It has also,
Perhaps.
I think,
Or
it does
market
something
sector.
basically because of the reasons that you named, which are that you go into it expecting that, oh, you're going to watch something from the 50s and it's going to adhere to all the 50s cultural mores that we associate with the 50s. It then succeeds in turning its entire audience temporarily into massive pearl clutchers. Because we all see it and we go, oh my!
And I don't think it's just that we all assume that Eisenhower era art is like very staid and conservative. I assume you're both familiar with the movie and potentially the stage show Grease.
Yes.
So there's the song "Look at Me, I'm Sandra Dee," where it's like talking about how Sandra Dee is kind of this icon of like anti-sex. So this being the first and actually to date only Sandra Dee vehicle I've seen, I'm like, oh well, this movie is going to have the libido of a wet sock, and then I watch it and it's like, oh no. There's a reason why they're singling out Sandra Dee as the one who doesn't want to have sex.
Yeah, no,
So that for me was even more so primed to me, even more than just like what I know about 1959 cinema, is like I kind of took it to be that this was an exceptionally chaste film, even by those standards.
Yeah, it's the rare example of a movie that does thwart expectations in that extremely meta way that it if anything has aged better because of it. It adds
Agreed.
that extra dimension to it that wouldn't have been there at the time.
Not completely agreed.
Anyway, Mandy, what's your number 4?
Okay, so going back to some things that Tim said before, I will go ahead and spoil that all of mine are in fact American. In part because, as far as I'm concerned, actual world history stops in about 1667, and we've all just been living in a fiction ever since then, and I am most familiar with the American portion of that fiction that we've all been living in. And also, unlike Tim, I did not avoid the 1980s. Though I did not go with any of the I think the most obvious suspects from the 1980s, in part because I absolutely loathe the movie Wall Street. It is...
I was going to say, Wall Street was the specific movie that I had in mind when I said, well, the 80s Zeitgeist made shitty movies.
It is one of my great, films that the general population seems to love that I absolutely, it just makes my teeth itch. However, you know what I...
not good.
You know what I love? Is Lady Wall Street.
Mandy?
Brennan, what did you say?
I was just asking you what you love. Okay, so...
I love Lady Wall Street.
Are we talking Working Girl?
We are talking Working Girl.
Hell yeah,
My
I've not
number
seen it.
4.
I want to.
You haven't seen it?
Oh,
Working
it's
Girl is so
good.
good. Oh man, it's so much better than Dude Wall
It has, low key, back to our earlier topic of conversation about songs and movies, low key, maybe Carly
It
Simon's
does,
best
yes,
song.
the song's so
It's the theme
good.
song to this
The theme
movie.
song to this movie is so good. Oh my god. It's one of the things. I need to watch this movie again because it's been a few years and there were some details that I had to look up about it to remind myself. But Working Girl stars Melanie Griffith as, what is her name? Tess, I think? We don't worry about character names, do we? Yeah.
This is a film where I very much go
Okay,
with
yeah, so
actor
there's
names.
Melanie
I can't help
Griffith,
it
and
there.
Melanie Griffith is a secretary who works for Sigourney Weaver. And Melanie Griffith is, she's very sweet, she's very soft-spoken, she talks very consciously in, this little girl sort of way because she learned how to talk that way in order to get attention. And then Sigourney Weaver is, exactly the opposite of that, where, she talks in kind of Elizabeth Holmes voice, and she dresses very, dress for success sharply, and they're supposed to reflect, the two sides of women trying to make it in the working world. And also, Melanie Griffith's character, she's from Staten Island, she takes the ferry to work, she's from the working class, whereas Sigourney Weaver is very much part of, the business establishment, where she can talk with great aplomb about stock portfolios and mergers and things like that. But then Melanie Griffith has this, brilliant business idea, and Sigourney Weaver decides that she's going to straight up steal it. And this launches Melanie Griffith on one of the most satisfying revenge stories, basically, ever, with the help of John Travolta. It is John Travolta. Yes, it is. And Melanie Griffith's character especially is so she's a very pretty lady who wants to get super rich with mergers and acquisitions, and she wants to marry a handsome man. So in addition to kind of embodying that, almost, I don't want to call it the Wall Street ethos because I don't want to keep giving that movie more credit than it deserves, but the kind of, it's more of, the girls can have it all kind of 80s type thing, where having it all is, I've got a high-paying job, and I've got a handsome man, and I got revenge on my bitchy boss, and this is just a girl boss fantasy for everybody. Except I don't like putting it that way because, again, this is just such a charming film. It's so well done. It turns into this actually really intense kind of edge of your seat suspense movie in about the last 20 to 30 minutes after having been just another fluffy comedy for most of its runtime. And it captures the things that we associate with the 80s without being really annoying about it, the way that a lot of movies that are about the 80s with a capital T-E often fall into. So, that is my number 4, Working Girl.
100%. This is a good picture. That is. I take it back, because that is an 80s film that is very good and is very zeitgeisty. Though I have to ding you on one point. I believe you just misidentified Harrison Ford as John Travolta.
I knew it wasn't John Travolta. I was like...
You said John Travolta, and then you looked it up, and I was like, well, you looked it up,
I didn't
so you
actually...
must be right, but
I
I'm
didn't
like
actually...
100%
No, I
sure
didn't
it's not
actually
John
look it
Travolta.
up. I was like, is it John Travolta? I'm pretty sure it's John Travolta. But yes, I did just confuse Harrison Ford for John Travolta.
I misread your...
That did definitely
I misread
just
your,
happen.
your head move and pause as pulled up Wikipedia. No, it is
It's
my boy
okay.
Harrison Ford. It's Indiana
It's
Jones.
okay. Those...
You are clearly
no,
not
those
the
hunky
Carrie.
guys all look the same.
No, this is a good film. You should for sure.
Yes,
see it.
Even though John... It's because we were talking about Grease and I got John Travolta in my head.
Oh, sure.
Oh, also, R.I.P. Olivia Newton-John.
I
That
know.
was a bummer to hear about today.
Yeah.
Oh God,
Yeah.
no.
I'm sorry, Tim.
Oh no.
I didn't mean to bring it down.
No.
I will.
Well, you
I'll
brought it
try to-
down. I'm not ready to. I can't talk about it.
I'll try to divert. So, well, on the Carly Simon tag, I was thinking maybe women-led office movies are the things to inspire creativity, because Dolly Parton's 9 to 5 is another like iconic song written for a film that is actually genuinely terrific.
Yeah, it is, and I would say that 9 to 5 itself is good and zeitgeisty, although I do think Working Girl is better.
I see that as possible, because 9 to 5 has a great cast, but an extremely weak middle third.
Yes.
Not 9 to 5, given its cast and its plot hook, should be more fun to watch.
Yeah.
That's true. It's really
So that's kind of-
draggy in
that's-
parts, isn't it?
It kind of is. It kind of is, and it also obviously peaks in its opening 2.5 minutes, because its opening 2.5 minutes are the song. But that's
They really should have just
maybe.
reprised it later on. Nobody can hear 9 to 5 too many times.
Exactly. It should just be a 90-minute long music video. No plot. No plot at all. So I think I'm sufficiently recovered from my shock that I could go now into my 4 if we're ready.
Yeah,
for that.
let's go.
So I'm at the 1960s. I held it off for one whole movie, but there was just so much zeitgeist in the 1960s. There was more zeitgeist in the 60s than in all the decades put together since, I think. And I've broken the one rule I just said I had, which was I was staying in the Anglosphere. I actually said America, but I'm going to break that rule again. It's a French movie, because of all the filmmakers who've ever been, who more incessantly and insistently made films about the zeitgeist in a really pedantic, angry, pretentious way than Jean-Luc Godard. So I had to have a Jean-Luc Godard film.
Which one is it?
And the Jean-Luc Godard film that I think is probably the most expressly about the zeitgeist is a film that could also be called The Children of Marx and Coca-Cola. Eh? Huh? Right? You guys know that reference from this very famous movie, right?
Mandy's laughing. Either to cover something or... I actually am not picking up what you're putting down. Tell me about this movie.
This film could be called The Children of Marx and Coca-Cola, is an on-screen intertitle in 1966's Masculin.
I have not
Féminin,
seen Masculin Féminin,
is-
but I have seen that line turned into a meme, so I knew where you were going with that.
Good enough. I'll take it. Godard would have definitely had something to say about memes. Probably something negative and judgmental, if I know my Godard. Because he was a negative and judgmental man, and so am I, and that's why I love his films. In this particular case, this is basically a story about teen pop culture in the 60s in France, in Paris specifically, and how it is both freeing, but also it's really just kind of a way of funneling people into new prisons. Like, they think that they're escaping their parents' bourgeois lifestyle, and they are, but they're escaping it for a sort of different incarnation of bourgeois living that's been packaged to them as revolutionary and transgressive, which I also think is extremely true about almost all youth culture. So it's like this film was made for me specifically.
That actually does sound really delightful.
So Jean-Pierre... This is what I'm saying. It's so good. It's so good if you can roll with French art film, and it's a lot to roll with, especially Godard style. I'm very pro this movie. This was, I think, the second Godard film I'd ever seen. Actually, it was very early in my Godard watching career. It was given a big restoration when I was in college. So me and some of my buddies trekked down to go see it at the Music Box in Chicago, Illinois. But stars Jean-Pierre Léaud as a young idealist who is sort of obsessed with this pop star played by Chantal Goya, who was herself actually a for real pop star. A lot of music stars cast rather than actors in this film. And it's basically just like a series of vignettes that sort of build into an overall plot, but it is more sort of about what's happening in the individual scene of just like life as a teenager in Paris in the 60s. I guess not a teenager, like early 20s. But just kind of all the things you're being hit with politically and culturally and artistically, and how all of these things are basically lying to you, and how there's no meaning in all of this sort of melange of stuff that people are telling you has a lot of meaning to it. And has possibly the single scene that speaks to me more than any other scene in the history of cinema, which is Paul, the character played by Jean-Pierre Léaud, is going to see a movie. And the movie should be in, I believe, 1.37 by 1 Academy aperture. But it is in 1.66 by 1. So he storms into the projection booth and beats up the projectionist. And
So this is just a movie about Tim.
That's all I have to say. It's basically a documentary of my dream journal. It's what Masculin, Féminin is. I shouldn't have put it as low as 4. I have no idea why I put this film as low as 4.
Now I'm trying to know what your 1 through 3 are.
They're all wrong. This is clearly my number 1.
Is that the first time that anybody's ever stolen their own number 1 on this podcast?
I think it's gotta be. But yeah, Masculine, Féminin, good picture.
Yeah. And it's interesting that both of you have so far picked a film that stars musicians, performing that normally aren't in movies. And I think that does speak to films being a part of the zeitgeist also, that kind of casting decision.
Oh, I'm not done talking about that.
Oh, no, I'm excited.
Wink, wink, wink.
I think I'm done. I don't think I ever started. But I'm very excited to hear what's coming up. But what's coming up first...
Surely at least one member of the cast of Gidget is a professional singer.
Oh, that almost certainly happened. I have I don't have that floating around in my head, though. But my number 3 is also from the 80s. I have attempted to capture the 80s zeitgeist. And the film that I have chosen is 1988's Child's Play.
Nice.
This is the film... Yeah?
It captures a really specific corner of the 80s zeitgeist that I am glad that it captured so very well.
Yeah, it captures the zeitgeist of children's toys. And I think maybe nothing was more important to the 80s than that. Or at least nothing has...
Certainly not to my experience of the 1980s.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think that is the thing, like children's toys and the merchandising empires that they birthed are still our culture. That is what we live in now. We're stuck in this Gen X phantasmagoric, like, merchandising hellscape.
Remember how Netflix came out with 2 different He-Man reboots in the same year?
Yep.
I try to forget that happened.
But anyway, this particular movie is capturing that in its kind of nascent era. It's about a single mother who has a son who is obsessed with getting a good guy doll. Good guy is based on the My Buddy, those giant horrible dolls that you could carry around and they would talk to you.
Yep. The My Buddy was for boys and the Kid Sister was for girls, and they had the same jingle but with different lyrics.
Mm-hmm. It was a real time to be an American. But he desperately wants this doll, so she buys one from this peddler on the streets of Chicago. And turns out this one does... batteries are not included, but what is included
is Brad Dourif, which is so much better, right?
Yeah, the spirit of Brad Dourif as the serial killer Charles Lee Ray, and horrible things start to happen. And they do get blamed on Andy Barclay the Kid, but guess what? Chucky the Doll's a killer. He's coming after you. Chris Sarandon's there. Can he help? Probably not.
Yeah, can he ever help?
Yeah, exactly. Not so much. But yeah, this movie is just it in ways that will be very fond, like especially in the toy store in the beginning. There's so many like actual legit toys from the 80s that will thrill people who were into that. But it's also just this kind of an indictment of the intense like merchandise consumerism of the 80s, and the fact that this need is so great that, I mean, she doesn't know there's a serial killer, but she has gone through these avenues that are dangerous to her in order to procure this for her child. And I think what's more 80s than that?
Not very much. Although I have sort of two questions. One, have you seen Jingle All the Way?
No, I haven't, but I've seen many clips.
I haven't either. Because I wonder if Jingle All the Way would have qualified for the 90s version of this, because Jingle All the Way was so very clearly based on Tickle Me Elmo. The other is more of an observation, really, but you've now got me thinking about the remake of Child's Play, which I really, really liked, and I think holds up quite well. But I do wonder, did they miss a trick by not having it be more about sort of... Because I don't feel like it is nearly as much of a cultural satire as you've sort of...
You know what I think would have actually... Because I was just thinking that somebody hugely missed an opportunity to make a horror movie about Furbies. And I feel like that would have been the key to an updated Child's Play, because those things were creepy as hell.
Yeah.
I have a vivid...
I had
because of bad decisions made on the parts of both me and my parents, I had a couple of Furbies when they were all the rage. And I have one very vivid childhood memory of one of my Furbies going insane because they lived in, like, my toy chest at night so that I couldn't see them staring at me. But then one of them, like, went haywire or got something stuck in its mouth. And so just in the middle of the night, from my toy chest, I suddenly heard something go, "Yum! Hungry!" And there is horror movie potential there.
I was going to say, that's a scene. No. We don't even have to rewrite that. We just have to figure out where the plot goes
around it. That's not just a scene. That's the trailer scene.
That's the trailer right there.
The teaser that's just like a 45-second scene from the movie.
And also, what's great about our current world of constantly recycled third-hand culture, you could still pitch and get a Furby movie greenlit.
I will be right back. I'm just going to go write up a quick treatment for Rob.
Well, I was going to say you might not know this, but one of the co-hosts of this podcast is a movie producer these days.
This is what I want to be known for, the Furby horror movie.
I mean,
worse things to be known for.
Yeah, so that's Child's Play. Mandy, what do you got for number 3?
What do I got? Oh boy. Okay, so this is the one you all are going to make fun of me for, and I don't care. Because I will defend this movie until I die, and I will be the only one who does it, and it doesn't matter.
I'm so excited.
Okay, so this movie came out, and I watched it when I was probably a little bit too old for its target audience, but that didn't matter. And the thing that I remember was that this was when I didn't have a TV, and so I watched all my movies on my laptop, and for a lot of movies, that makes them suffer. This was, I think, the first movie that I watched that not only extremely benefited from being watched on a computer, but I sincerely believe that that is the only correct way to watch it. I am pretty sure that if you watched this movie in a theater, it would be a terrible experience, and that's probably the experience that a lot of people had watching it. But I watched it the right way on my computer, which is good because the entire movie takes place on a computer screen, on the internet, with a bunch of teenagers, and the mysterious interloper in their Skype chat, who appears to either be or pretending to be a dead girl. And I am talking, of course, about 2014's underrated masterpiece, Unfriended.
Laura Barnes, baby!
Laura Barnes!
Yeah, it's a good movie.
Wait,
why would anyone make fun of you?
You like this movie too? Oh my god, I knew there was...
I have a positive review of this movie on our website.
Yes, me too. Well, I also like it. I don't have.
I also believe that I also believe that in the review I say words to the effect of "It's good seeing it in a theater, but boy, I'll bet this absolutely kills."
It is so good if you watch it on a laptop in the dark when it's way too late for any civilized human being to be awake.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's so good. Like it's everything
I feel like you set this up wrong. I was expecting this to be like some sort of like sequel to
Oh
like a
no,
Barbie
this
princess
no,
with
I'm.
her horse
This makes
movie
me
or
so
something like
happy because this is one that I always get made fun of for because I have also always maintained that Unfriended is a superior movie to It Follows, which
Well, we had something
did.
going there. We did.
whatever.
killed
It
it.
follows. It follows was overly complicated and kind of got boring by the end. Whereas Unfriended, I was just like, yes, shoot this directly into my veins the entire way through. It's a very fun, satisfying slasher. The kills are satisfying. The revenge story is very satisfying, and I also appreciate any movie about teenagers that manages to both treat them with a modicum of compassion without pulling any punches about how psychotic teenagers are. Because if any of my students are listening, first of all, go away, you shouldn't be listening to this. But if any of you are listening, you know it to be true. Teenagers can be monsters sometimes. And the teenagers in this movie, it turns out, in a lot of ways, are monsters. And the movie's not shy about showing them at their most monstrous, and especially how the internet contributes to making them. I guess not making them, but about bringing out the most monstrous qualities in them. And in that way, even though 2014 wasn't even all that long ago, it feels like the movie was kind of prescient because the potential of the internet to bring out the worst and stupidest in all of us has only been magnified since then.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that is an excellent choice.
Thank you.
I
Absolutely.
also in the theaters did feel like, oh, I wish I'd watched this on my laptop, especially they're
kind of a little bit.
the most chilling moments are like, oh, that would have really enhanced it. Although I did see it my favorite way to see a horror movie, which was during the Grand Prix in Long Beach. There is a theater that sits in the center of the Grand Prix racetrack. And when you watch a movie during the Grand Prix, you hear this ghostly, otherworldly hum around you the whole time.
Amazing. Oh, man.
And so that did help a lot, but I wish I'd seen it on my computer.
Yeah, because when you see it on your computer, there are moments when, like, a cursor will float across the screen, and you will have a moment of, like, wait, am I doing that? So...
I love that.
So you get to guest star in your own little horror movie, in your own little dark living room, and it's so much fun.
That's awesome. Real quick for both of you, Unfriended Dark Web, thumbs up, thumbs down.
Thumbs in.
I'm a thumbs down, but I like Betty Gabriel.
I'm a thumbs
I think it is.
tentatively up. I had enough fun with it that I was willing to let all of the stupid stuff slide.
I am also somewhat of a thumb sideways, although probably it drifts downward. I think it is more conceptually sound, but it's just not as scary.
I think that's accurate.
Yeah,
I thought it was a decent successor to Unfriended, but I have no particular desire to watch it again and again the way I do with Unfriended.
Mm-hmm. Sure, that makes perfect sense.
Yeah, and it's not a like horror movie confection in the way that Unfriended is too.
No.
Anyway, so Tim, what's your number 3?
So my number 3. Well, I'm leaving the '60s for now. Going to the other period that I like more than anyone that I lived during, which is World War II. Because who doesn't love World War II? Great time to be alive. But so World War II, of course, has its own sort of very mythologized and very like prominent way of existing in the world, and like it was a time of great patriotism. It was probably the last time that really patriotism was sort of an unmixed good thing to feel in this country, that like no one would sort of culture war you for that sort of thing. And so the film I have is in part about that sense of like, oh yay, we're all in this together. And it's very much about sort of the specifics of life during World War II in a way that's almost impenetrable, because like every element of the plot is sort of oriented around these ways of existing in the world that we don't have anymore. And the film is 1943's The More the Merrier, which is about housing rationing.
Oh.
So
I love this movie,
saying,
and now I'm sad
just,
that I didn't even remember it.
What even is housing rationing?
It's a niche political issue that speaks very much to my heart, even though I didn't live through it.
There you go. Exactly. But so in the area around Washington, D.C. during the war, all of these people need to be in Washington, D.C. to help prosecute the war. But D.C. was not built for all of these people. So there's not houses for them. So the houses need to be rationed. And basically, this is about three individuals. One is played by Jean Arthur. One is played by Charles Coburn, who is one of my all-time favorite garrulous patrician gentlemen who just kind of is roly-poly and always seems like he just smelled something really sour and is just kind of like, being like grumpy but in a lovable way. He's sort of like a crusty old dwarf or something. And the third is Joel McCrea, who is he's about to go off to war. And that's kind of the briefly pinned subtext that just kind of floats through the rest of the movie, that he is probably going to leave and die. Like, we're meant to understand that everyone in the movie knows this is the case. They don't have to say it, because they all know it, because that's the Zeitgeist. And so Coburn, who's this extremely wealthy man who's in Washington, to talk to FDR about, like, here's what we need to do, he couldn't find a house, so he ends up in this flop house run by Jean Arthur. And Joel McCrea is in this flop house. Not flop house, it's a nice house, it's a boarding house. Joel McCrea is in the house run by Jean Arthur. And Charles Coburn is bored and believes that he can control everyone's lives because, again, he's garrulous and patrician. So he decides his game is going to be to hook these two kids up before Joel McCrea has to leave the country to go die in a war. But it's funny because it's a rom-com about dying in a war.
It is a rom-com, though, that one of the things I appreciated about it when I saw it, and it's one of those movies, again, that I need to watch again because it's been a while, was that it made it very clear how much being in all this together can really blow sometimes. Like, we all feel really good about it after it happens, but when you're in the thick of it, being asked to literally be all up in here together, that really sucks.
And that's part of it as well. Again, it's like, it's about this specific inconvenience that everyone felt that, no, it just doesn't even make sense as like a thing that you would do anymore. But like, it makes perfect sense why they would both feel like it was their moral duty to do this. And also, I hate you so hard for making me do it.
It's the only movie that I can think of off the top of my head that I would describe as like a claustrophobic rom-com, where like you're almost excited for going... You're almost excited for Charles Coburn to go off to war because then at least he'll have some breathing space for only that reason. Joel McCrea, yeah.
Joel McCrea, yes.
I am really getting all these names right tonight, aren't I?
Although Charles Coburn going off to war, I mean, Hitler would have looked at him and would have just like freaked out and died because Charles Coburn is just a big old bear of a man.
That would have been our secret weapon against the Germans.
I am possibly the only living Charles Coburn fanboy, is the thing about me. So, and this is the movie he won his Oscar for. Because he's good in it. Because he's always good, because he's Charles Coburn. He's my boo.
That's lovely.
You have a shrine of all of his Teen Beat centerfolds in your closet?
If only. But no. So that's my number
Wonderful. 3. We will get to our top 2, but first, remember you can find more details about all the movies we've watched at our website, alternateending.com. Before we head to our break, you might be wondering about ways to support the show, get early access and exclusive content, make us watch a movie, pick your own episode topic, and more from our Patreon site.
Remember how like an hour and a half ago I thought we were already to this point?
Yeah, that was wonderful.
I like doing episodes without Rob because they end up being 3 hours long. This is exciting to me.
It is
exciting.
Is
Rob the disciplinarian? Oh, wow.
Oh, yes.
You'd be surprised.
I don't know if you guys noticed when I set up the Zoom meeting that we're currently enjoying, I did say 3 hours.
You did, that's true.
Yeah, and...
Anyway, Brennan, tell us about ways we can support the show,
Yes, we
please.
do have a Patreon, and I wanted to give a shout-out to Cameron Shaw, who's at the Palme d'Or level, and then we've got Aaron at Critics' Choice, the $8 level. Oh, is that mine? We'll find out. Wait, no. Hold on. It's at the $8 level, but it says Critics' Choice.
Critics' Choice
Rob
is,
just wasn't paying attention.
Critics' Choice is, I think in the new thing, like there's an $8 level where Tim talks about something on the show, and there's an $8 level where you talk about something on the show.
Yeah, but mine's not called that.
No, yours
so
is
that
Saturn
is,
Award.
Yes, it is indeed. Thank you, Mandy, my one Saturn Award Patreon member. But yes, sorry, I will.
It's a good place.
Even
to
though Rob, Oh yeah, I'm so excited to watch the movie. But anyway, so Rob's ghost is on this podcast because he sent me this, so I blame him.
Rob, Laura Barnes, Jarazinski.
Exactly. Yeah, we've also got Travis Neely at the $12 level and Brian Fowler at the $25 level. Thank you so much, Brian. I can't wait for your next Bride of Alternate Ending topic request. That'll be at the beginning of next year. Keep an eye out for that. But also, I want to thank all our listeners who support the show and make their Amazon purchases through our site. Doing it is easy. Just go to our website, alternateending.com, click on our Amazon banner, and seamlessly go about your purchases. All proceeds go to making our show better. Since our last episode, here are the things that were purchased. So we've got a hairbrush, a curved vented brush for faster blow drying. That's exciting. In books and textbooks, we've got a Confederacy of Dunces paperback. We've also got an enzymatic toothpaste for cats and dogs, a pump for a bird bath fountain, and then we got Kindle books. We've got Race, Class, and Gender in Medieval Cinema. And medieval is in quotes. We also have Under Crescent and Cross, the Jews in the Middle Ages. Which hi Gavin.
That's also the medieval, so it all comes together.
Exactly. We've also got a full set bamboo steamer for authentic Chinese cuisine. We've got a self-cleaning slicker brush for dogs. And then here's my favorite part. Here's the movies everyone's watching. On Blu-ray and DVD, we have the Halloween 4K collection. I assume that's Brian Fowler.
Yeah, I bought mine through a Diabolic DVD deck.
Ah, you didn't support us. That's fine. He bought it with your Patreon money.
That works.
Blu-ray and DVD, we also have The Man Who Would Be King and 1980s The Fog on 4K. Whoa. We got a John Carpenter fan in the house. And video on demand, we have The Chosen Season 1 and inscrutably Terminator Salvation.
You know, sometimes people are just doing a Terminator binge.
You do. That was Zeitgeist movie of 2008.
It wasn't.
It didn't reflect the Zeitgeist, but it was part of it.
It did not intersect with the Zeitgeist.
And this episode is brought to you by Libsyn. Do you have an idea for a great new podcast? You can bring your idea to life and start your podcast today with Libsyn. Our podcast has been on Libsyn for, I think, 7 years, so you can tell that we love it.
For however long our podcast has been a podcast, it's been on Libsyn.
From day one, episode 1, before Tim was a glimmer in Rob and Carrie's eye, we were on Libsyn. Libsyn has everything you need to plan, launch, and grow your own podcast. Libsyn provides some of the best resources created by expert podcasters who will show you everything you need to know, like what equipment you should use, how to record great audio, how to get your show onto Apple Podcasts and other popular platforms, and much, much more. Those other popular platforms are very important, is one thing you learn as a podcast producer, because there are so many people who are like, I don't have Apple Podcasts. I want to listen on Spotify or fucking Stitcher or one of the million other things that I don't fully...
I mean,
How dare they?
I don't have Apple Podcasts, but that's okay because I don't listen to
How dare they exercise the choice that the market offers to them?
No, they have choice.
You're one of those people who gets like shitty when other people have an Android and you have to text them on your Apple and you're like, your Android shows up in green.
No. I'm not mad about that, but there are some where it's like, wait, why isn't your podcast on Bing Bong? And it's like, we'll have to find a new fucking thing to plug my RSS feed into. Like, I know the basic ones, but everyone's always got a new one.
Also, y'all should just listen to their podcast by hitting play on the website because we get page views for that. And then we get ad revenue. And then we're monetizing you more efficiently.
Ta-da! But yes. But plus, as a friend of Alternate Ending, when you sign up with Libsyn, you get your first month of podcast hosting for free. There has never been a better time than right now for you to start podcasting. Visit Libsyn.com.
Famously wide open marketplace.
Visit Libsyn.com and use code FRIEND, F-R-I-E-N-D. That's Libsyn.com and use code FRIEND, F-R-I-E-N-D to get started and create your podcast today.
I just figured out why Rob doesn't do ad copy reads while I'm in the room.
Why? Because you will insult the company.
You just figured that out?
I mean, I thought it was a fun thing. I thought it was cool and good. And then I realized, oh, wait, I'm probably saying things that will turn off our advertisers. But that's okay, because I'm not in it for the money.
Well, wonderful.
Carrie, you and I try to stay healthy, right?
You know, I mean, I try to exercise most days. I eat a lot of egg whites and kale until about 4 p.m. And then I'm just chips and dip until bedtime.
Same. And like you, Care,
Packing all the healthy stuff in meals to try to reach my goals hasn't worked, and I hate taking vitamins and pills. Thankfully, Athletic Greens AG1 has the answer. With one delicious scoop of AG1, you're absorbing 75 high-quality vitamins, minerals, whole food source superfoods, probiotics, adaptogens to help start your day right. This special blend of ingredients supports your gut health, your nervous system, your immune system, your energy recovery, focus, and aging. All the things.
But here's the thing. It sounds great, but it also sounds like it tastes kind of healthy.
No, it actually tastes great, not healthy. It has a tropical flavor that makes me think of our upcoming trip to the Caribbean, and it will leave you feeling more alert and clear during the day. Also helps you get your Z's.
I can use all those things, but Rob, you also know I'm a little bit cheap. So how much would something like this set us back?
Care, it's cheap enough even for you.
Whoa!
AG1 is less than $3 a day, so you're investing in your health instead of that cold brew habit.
Okay, all right. Sign me up.
Right now, it's time to reclaim your health and arm your immune system with convenient daily nutrition. It's just one scoop in a cup of water every day. That's it. No need for a million different pills and supplements to look out for your health. To make it easy, Athletic Greens is going to give you a free 1-year supply of immune-supporting vitamin D and 5 travel packs with your first purchase. All you have to do is go to athleticgreens.com/emerging. That's EMERGING. Again, that is athleticgreens.com/emerging to take ownership of your health and pick up the ultimate daily nutritional insurance.
Let's get to our number 2, shall we?
Yeah.
Oh, I get to start. Great. My number 2 is from 2001. It is the film Josie and the Pussycats.
Ooh.
So this film is about the titular Josie and the Pussycats. Josie is played by Rachel Lee Cook. The Pussycats are Tara Reid and Rosario Dawson. It's a 2001 film because Tara Reid is in it. Potentially her best role. I think there's not a lot of competition, but it's up there.
I'm trying to think of another Tara Reid role.
She's in American Pie. She's in the Sharknado movies.
Oh.
Is
Okay.
she in one of the Uwe Boll video game adaptations?
Probably.
Oh, she is. I think she's in Alone in the Dark.
Is she in Alone in the Dark? That's what I was thinking.
So yeah,
Yeah, I'm pretty sure she is.
it's
Unlikely to be competition for the title of her.
unlikely, but
No.
she is quite good in Josie and the Pussycats. But yes, Josie and the Pussycats is about this band in the small town of Riverdale. Maybe you've heard of it. And they basically a boy band that is the boy band of the moment vanishes in a horrible plane crash, and the record label run by Parker Posey and Alan Cumming. Well, Alan Cumming is like her toady stooge. Parker Posey is the one in charge. They find this tiny band, Josie and the Pussycats, while they're struggling, playing at bowling alleys and shitty gigs. And they're like, what if we made you the biggest stars on the planet? But the secret is that the company is putting subliminal messaging into their songs to get people to buy shit. It's like, buy Nike products, join the army, shit like that. And it is just, it is this whole ode to the fact that pop culture is manufactured to sell you things. The film is so product placement is so layered or baked into the concept of what the film is that you kind of cannot view a frame of this film without seeing 80 logos for Target or Nike or whatever. I believe there's a giant bowl of bugles that gets overturned in the third act climax. It is this extremely heady concoction that is mocking everything about the MTV culture of the early 2000s. Carson Daly makes an appearance in the film. It is just purest Zeitgeist satire of the best kind. I really love Josie and the Pussycats. Thoughts?
Now I'm just a little bit sad because you made me
have not
think
seen
about
this film.
MTV in the early 2000s.
Well, yeah, no, it's a sad place to be, but that's why they're making fun of it.
I also have not seen Josie. and the
Damn it.
Pussycats.
Okay, it's a great movie.
It is definitely a film that I'm well aware has a lot of contemporary reevaluations. When it came out, it was just savaged by the critics. But I know that Film Twitter has really taken this film to its breast, which both is an encouragement to rewatch it and a reason that I kind of haven't, because Film Twitter is wrong and dumb about so many things.
I resent being compared to Film Twitter in any way, so I hope you can trust... Well, insofar as you know what my taste is and whether or not that will work for you... But I would say Josie and the Pussycats has a solid soundtrack on top of everything, and also Parker Posey is just Parker Poseying it up. It was never a better time to be Parker Posey.
I mean, I do love Parker Posey.
Her outfits are...
And first half of the 2000s is peak Parker Posey.
Absolutely. And she is giving the most ridiculous outfits you've ever seen. It is a runner-up for your best costumes list. Definitely a neglected title. But anyway, Mandy, what's your number 2?
My number 2, so I'm going way back in time now, and then I'm going to stay there. Everything else I've got, well, I guess my last 2 are on the early side of things. We're going back to the 1950s.
Hell yeah.
Where we have already spent some time. But this time, we are specifically going to the part of the 1960s where everybody was just kind of afraid of and paranoid about stuff. And whether you were afraid of the communists or the anti-communists, you would find something in my number 2 that you could interpret as a political allegory in your favor. With all those
Whatever
pod
are
people,
you talking about?
With all those pod people running around. I am, of course, referring to Don Siegel's 1956 Invasion of the Body Snatchers.
Oh, excellent picture.
Absolutely classic film.
Classic film. I watched this for a class.
Classic piece of allegory.
I watched this for a class, and I did pay attention to it in one of those rare times when I paid full attention in class, because I was just fascinated by this movie. I love this movie, and I'm also fascinated by its contemporary reception, because when it came out, a lot of the early reviews and analyses were actually pretty split on just seeing what they wanted to see in it. You can find analyses that are like, this is clearly a metaphor for communism, and then you can find analyses that are like, this is clearly a metaphor for McCarthyism and the threat of like rampant anti-communist witch hunts. And I think retrospectively, it pretty clearly falls on one side of those. But to me, it is also the sign of a good political movie that people can take it so strongly in more than one way, because I don't like movies that obviously tell me what to think. I want my movies to non-obviously tell me what to think about things like that.
I also feel like the ambiguity kind of even extends out a little bit, because Don Siegel is one of those directors whose politics feel like they're easy to pin down, and then they turn out not to be.
And then they're not, and that's one of the things that's so great about him. He's a little like Clint Eastwood in that way, actually. And I also adore Clint Eastwood. Dirty Harry was on my long list of movies as well, and alas had to be cut for worthier candidates. But this is just a great movie all the way around. I kind of assume everybody just knows what it's about, and even if they haven't seen it, have kind of seen it just because it's such a cultural fixture. But it is such a tense film, and even though the pod people are like, these. They probably like bought some styrofoam things at a drugstore and glued them together for a couple of dollars, because they're pretty flimsy props, but they're so scary despite that. Like, this movie is still scary even at this point. Yeah, go ahead.
It holds up, I think, literally better than any other 50s invasion movie.
I would agree with that, with the ones that I have seen.
Yeah,
which is fewer almost certainly than the ones that you have seen, but still I will agree.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And also, they use one of the best special effects, which is people performing roles. Like, it is
actors doing the acting thing.
Mm-hmm. It's so tremendously drum tight effective even now. It's such a good movie. Great choice.
I almost feel like the Stepford Wives, I know the Stepford Wives was also based on a book, but like the Stepford Wives and then all of the Stepford Wives type films pretty much owe their existence to Invasion of the Body Snatchers in some way.
No, I buy that. I completely buy
absolutely.
That. The people around you are not what they seem.
And so. You will also soon not be what you seem.
Yes. Is it a hot take if I think that this is a better film than the 1978 version?
No, I would absolutely agree with that.
Yeah, I would agree with you as well, but I think that the Body Snatchers formula holds up incredibly well across a lot of different decades.
Yes, and also 50% of the adaptations of the novel I don't like, so I don't know if I entirely agree.
The 1978 one I would describe as fine, but I also think, and this is part of why this one is on my list, that this one from the 50s, again, captures something specifically about the 50s in a very profound and working way.
I definitely think the 50s movie is more consciously part of its zeitgeist. I think the 70s movie is, but I think it's more incidental. and the
seems
90s
fair.
and 2000s version are both just trash.
We don't have to talk about those.
Yeah, we don't.
No, we don't.
Anyway, yeah. What's your number 2, Tim?
My number 2 gets us back to the 60s, my decade, my beloved 60s. And as I said, I was going to have a little bit more to say about casting singers.
Okay.
And here's the thing about this movie. It should be absolute garish trash. It was conceived with the most transparently cynical view towards what is the thing that's super popular right now. It's these dim-witted Liverpudlian mop-top bozos. And what do people do? They run after them and yell and have lady orgasms. Let's make a movie about that. So they made a movie about it. And somehow this movie, born out of the most transparently stupid motivations you could possibly motivate, somehow this movie became the best media satire of the 1960s.
And you're talking about
And
Sgt.
I'm
Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band, right?
I'm, of course, talking about Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band. No, I'm talking
Dare
about
you.
1964's A Hard Day's Night, the Beatles movie, starring the Beatles, as the Beatles, playing the Beatles songs, directed by Richard Lester, who also never really hit this height again. Like, he won the Palme d'Or the following year for not a very good film called The Knack and How to Get It. But we have just this, like, weird miracle movie in which it's literally the Beatles playing the Beatles, trying to record a show, but their fans are just so horny for them that they can't not run after them screaming and like, oh no, the Beatles have to run away. I don't know why it works. I mean, I do know why it works. It's like well built, but like how did this movie that could have so easily just been this kind of fad cash in? Because this was before the Beatles were the Beatles. Like this was '64. It somehow turns into this incredibly airtight, sophisticated look at how TV like filters our perception of reality and how like media properties are packaged and how people do or do not understand the degree to which they're being shaped by like influencers and sort of social media before it was called social media. And like
I was gonna say, when did
and
this
it
movie
also
come out?
has that's what I'm saying, and it also has the soundtrack to A Hard Day's Night, which puts it high in the running for having the best original soundtrack in the history of cinema. So there you go. That's my number 2.
Yeah, I mean, you can't argue with that. I was a huge Beatlemaniac in high school. And yeah, that film, it's excellent. And it thrives. Obviously, it does a lot of good things as a film, but it thrives because a lot of times it just kind of kicks back and lets the Beatles be the Beatles and just be charismatic. And
It just lets the Beatles be the Beatles.
and that's a great instinct.
Exactly. Like a lot of it is improv. You can sort of tell which of the Beatles were more comfortable with improv and which one of them needed the safety net of a screenplay, shall we say. But yeah, no, it's kind of such an all things to all people sort of movie because it is that crass, cashed in, you like the Beatles, here's the Beatles. Like it is that. Like it is giving us just Beatles playing Beatles music in this cheapo movie that was cranked out in like 2 weeks. But it's also, on top of that, this incredibly funny physical comedy, this really smart satire.
I think that
It's so good.
that crass ploy also works because, number one, people actually did like the thing that the executives crassly believed that they liked, and that thing was actually good, which is not always true.
It's a real eclipse of great things coming together.
of those cash cows that people want to milk.
No, for sure. But yeah, it's just like you look at all these other movies that are like a pop star in their film debut, and like some of them aren't bad, but none of them are this good. And I just, again, it's weird to me that everything just clicked this one time so well.
Yeah, this was not the Beatles' Glitter.
No. It was not the Beatles' Glitter. It was not the Beatles' Mrs. Brown, You've Got a Lovely Daughter, which was 3 years later. And it's a movie about the members of Herman's Hermits trying to rescue a greyhound named Mrs. Brown, and I have seen it.
That actually sounds, from that description, like it might be kind of adorable.
Yeah.
Well, it's not.
Oh, that makes me sad.
It's really boring.
Oh.
It's really, really
Oh
boring.
God! And if Tim thinks it's boring,
Hey, now.
no, someone here has seen Turin Horse, and someone has not.
That movie is supposed to be boring, and therefore it doesn't count.
I think it counts as boring when it's supposed to be boring. Anyway.
But when it's supposed to be boring, it doesn't count as a flaw.
Is that true?
It is a it is a feature, not a bug, but it is not a feature that I require. Anyway,
because like for example, the movies of Harmony Korine are supposed to be making me hate the world, and they succeed at that, but I don't think that makes them good.
I would be hard pressed to call Harmony Korine a bad filmmaker, even though I would shove him in front of a train if I had the chance.
Fair enough.
All right.
So. It's complicated.
That is totally fair.
What's your number one, Brennan?
Spiffy pick.
We're at the end of the line. This is my most contemporary movie on my list. It is from 2006. It is titled Borat, Cultural Learnings of America for Make Benefit Glorious Nation of Kazakhstan. It is quite literally a document of the American relationship to the Middle East during the Bush administration. And it is a harrowing comedy that all of the people who quoted it in my middle school did not understand. Clearly, I came to this movie after I graduated college.
How were people in your middle school watching this? Where were their parents?
Absentee, apparently. But so many people took this movie as very nice. Like, it's like, oh, as a guy, he's got a funny voice because people from foreign lands, they're pretty funny. And that's not really the thing that Borat is. That's part of it. But the thing that Borat is to just push and stretch the limits of American culture during the War on Terror. And this is the movie on my list that I like the least, but I think it is one of the best at capturing the zeitgeist of its time. It is just chilling to watch.
I have made a decision that I will never rewatch this film. I loved it in the mid-2000s. I do not want to find out what has become of it as a document in the years since, but I'm glad to know that it captures something.
It certainly does.
I believe it. I don't care for this movie.
No.
But I understand why people do.
Well, like I said, this is the movie that it had a strong enough zeitgeist pull that I had to put it on, even though it's not a movie that lives in my heart in the same way that the other ones I chose do.
I feel like it lives in a more, probably a baser part of the anatomy if it lives anywhere.
Yeah, probably. But I couldn't resist the pull of including it. It told me it had to, and so I listened. Anyway, Mandy, what's your number one?
Yeah, me too. All right, I'm going in the opposite direction again. So, for a moment, I thought Tim and I might overlap when he started talking about World War II and being all in everything together. But then Tim's World War II movie was like a grand patriotic movie that's supposed to make us feel good eventually about the sacrifices that we all had to make. Whereas my number one kind of aimed for the opposite of that, and kind of went in for like the parts of immediately post-World War II America that we all sort of overlooked or kind of forgot about, and that's particularly what happens when everybody comes home and the parades are over and everybody's got to get back to their lives, perhaps ironically the best years of them.
Ooh.
And I am referring to 1946's The Best Years of Our Lives. So this is a really long I think it's about 3 hours long. It is an epic post-war movie about 3 World War II hero veterans who are coming back home and now have to deal with contrary to kind of like the way that we tend to look at post-war America, when everything actually was kind of crappy economically for a little while before we arrived in the relative boom of the 50s. So they come back home to a recession. This was one of the movies that Frederick March won an Oscar for. He plays one of the veterans who was a banker in his former life and then comes back home and finds that he cannot really cope with being a normal person anymore. Frederick March is one of my very favorite actors, especially in the things that he can do with his face. He has this uncanny ability to paste on this big, beautiful smile that never reaches his eyes, while his eyes are conveying sadness and terror and desperation and all kinds of other things that just, like, make your heart jump into your throat. This is a beautifully romantic movie. It's a beautifully sad movie. It's a beautifully introspective movie. And it feels like everybody involved was there to make a really important movie, but not a really important movie with a capital I. It was like, there are the stories of these people that we want to tell, and they're good stories, but we're also gonna get the audience to think about what they've glossed over. And it did actually come out immediately in the post-war period, so it was a more immediate, perhaps, glossing over that was happening that maybe needed to be addressed a little bit. But it's also just like, this is, of the Best Picture winners that I have seen, this is one of my very favorites. This is not a movie that I have the energy to watch all that often, but every time I do, it's just like, what a beautiful experience this is.
Yeah, this is a movie I'm deeply in need of rewatching. I saw it many years ago, and the length is really what hit me.
It's very long.
It's very long.
It is very long.
And it's not a very long Godfather style or Lawrence of Arabia style where like the length is about scope. It's just like, it's just long. But I mean, it's also, I'm not saying that in a dismissive way. I mean, because this is William Wyler, who is one of the most important film directors that America ever produced. The most Oscar-nominated film director, if I don't think this was one of the films he won for. And this in particular is like it is a crucial social document. It is also a crucial document in the development of realist aesthetics, and it is a crucial document in the development of deep focus cinema. So like, it's just a super stupid important movie. So I do need to rewatch it, because at the time I saw it, I was probably 17, and I just bounced off of it so hard.
Yeah, the length is a bit punishing. Like that, like it is not one of those 3-hour movies that blows by really, really fast. I will probably check my watch once or twice the next time that I watch it. But it feels like it is that long because they knew they could probably cut something and knew that maybe they should, but couldn't decide what that thing was that they should cut. So they left it all in there because they liked it all. And I understand that. Like, if you took any 10 or 15 minute clip of this movie and just showed it to me, I would be like, this is beautiful and makes me feel all the feelings. And it's just all of those 10 to 15 minute clips strung together. And but
I also think that
by the end of it, I'm usually over the length, I find. And I've seen it 3 or 4 times.
I also feel like it is a film in which the length isn't incidental, and to quote Brennan's favorite filmmaker, Bellatar, or not to quote, but to like to reference, I think there's a point at which the grind of it is kind of necessary. Like, it's meant to make you feel like, oh, we're just stuck.
It's also half the length of Satan Tango, so...
I'm stuck with this movie, and I'm never leaving this movie.
Yeah, that is
you
a
know
fair
what else?
point, though.
No cats die in this case of this movie, so that's 2 counts on which it's worse than Satan Tango. But no, I need to rewatch it. I for sure need to rewatch it.
And I need to watch it. I regret.
And I have it on Blu-ray, so rewatching it will happen someday.
Excellent. I need to have it on Blu-ray. I should. Maybe I will go order it through the Amazon link.
Warner Archive right now is doing an August sale for movies for $49,
Ooh.
and it is a Warner Archive Blu-ray. So
Ooh, I will have to figure out 3 other movies that I want.
Killer Party, baby.
yes, indeed.
Ooh.
It's a very
That would be a
silly
fun-
slasher movie.
That would be a very fun double feature. Killer Party and then The Best Years of Our Lives.
Like, Killer Party is like a solid 82 minutes or whatever, you know? So it's
that
perfect.
sounds great.
You could watch it twice during a screening of Best Years of Our Lives and have time for a potty break.
Excellent. Yes. Also, I'm just going to throw out there that the worst part of They/Them is that it's over 100 minutes long.
It's insulting.
No, it's not.
sure
You're
It
lying.
really is.
No. Oh, I
You
hate
know what?
that.
I feel worse and worse the more we talk about the movie.
I'm sorry.
I cannot wait to see this movie. I'm going to give this movie a 1/2 star review, and it's still going to feel like I'm being generous.
Yeah, probably. Anyway, Tim,
So,
what's
Tim,
your
you're number 1.
So my number 1 is also, much like your list, Brennan, I'm ending with my most contemporary.
Oh, yeah.
film. I'm taking us all the way up to 1970.
Ooh.
Yes. Almost, but not quite, within 10 years of the year of my birth. It is, mind you, still kind of about the 60s. Because what it's really about is how the 60s, which the zeitgeist of the 60s was all about peace and love and rock and roll and sexual revolution. We're going to change the world for the better. And what happened, they fucked up. They didn't. The 60s failed. The 60s were the most colossal failure in the history of American cultural movements. I think you could go so far as to say. National cultural movements, because it failed in Europe. It failed in France, very famously. So what happens in the 70s, American directors are kind of like, oh, well, that happened. And they just go on and they start making really wonderful, like, urban dramas. European artists are like, oh, we're going to grapple with this. We're going to spend some time just being like, what the hell happened? So, like, there's this mood in the 70s in European art cinema of like, well, 68 was a thing, and then it failed, and now we're doomed, and we're going to die horribly ever after. And so my favorite of all those, and when I said that I had 5 films in or about the 60s, the one that I did not include was Out One. Another one of those just scintillate, a film that you could watch Vestige of Our Lives 4.5 times during its running time. I did not include that one. What I did include from 1970, Michelangelo Antonioni's Zabriskie Point, in part because it is about a European director turning that lens onto the American cultural left of the 60s. Zabriskie Point is Antonioni going to the United States to basically diagnose what happened to the hippies. They didn't make it. Where are they now? What is left of the beautiful but idiotic movement that was the hippie movement in the United States? And Zabriskie Point has a extremely caustic diagnosis of what happened to the hippies. Famously ends by just setting off an explosion just to kind of destroy shit.
Did they all get gum disease and become conservatives?
No, it's unfortunately not that forward-looking. It just assumes that they all go out to the desert and fuck themselves to death, basically.
That's fair.
That
Which
sounds
is close
pretty
enough.
good, honestly.
But yeah, so Zabriskie Point, Michelangelo Antonioni's story about how the 60s just didn't make it, and they left us with the 70s, and here we are. It's 1970. Where are we going? Well, we're just gonna go into the dust and decay.
Yeah, it sounds like a good entry point into one of the grimmest decades in cinema history.
I mean, it is not bad for sure.
Well,
I have no 70s on my list because honestly I couldn't decide.
The 70s as a zeitgeist is easy for me to describe, or at least easy for me to conceptualize. 70s zeitgeist movies was super tough. Because
it almost feels like the 70s zeitgeist was more about the 60s than the 70s in a lot of ways. Like
to a certain extent, right? And The Godfather hit the zeitgeist, but it's about the 40s and, Chinatown and so on. And the George Lucas music movie. Oh my God. American Graffiti. So there's a lot of nostalgia kicking around, a lot of sort of critically or not critically looking back at the past. But what are the movies about the 70s? And I don't know that I can answer that question.
the Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
It's tough.
Yeah, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Honestly, but as I already said, horror movies can't also be zeitgeist movies.
Disagree.
Wait, why not?
Anyway,
I just threw a bomb just to see what would happen.
You threw a bomb at a
Sometimes
movie
it
that's
fizzles.
about the gas crisis of the 70s, so oopsies.
It's about Vietnam.
It's about
sir.
a lot of things. It's also about
It's about
vegetarians.
It's about your mom.
I don't know, maybe.
Is your mom Marilyn Burns? Because that would be awesome.
That would be
That would
really
be pretty
awesome.
awesome.
Anyway, our audience also submitted their picks. Just like us, there was a lot of scattered titles that didn't really overlap. So we have a top 6. All of these only had overlap between 2 people.
Ooh.
So the top 6, and I put it in chronological order also, is The Rules of the Game, Mandy's pick, The Best Years of Our Lives, Night of the Living Dead.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Do the Right Thing, Clueless, and Trainspotting.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it's a solid list. And this week's, for every top 5, we pick a random winner to win an Amazon movie rental. This week's winner is Pliny the Millennial, whose list was The Great Dictator, The Rules of the Game, The Social Network, Children of Men, and 3 Colors, white. If that...
Social Network's a real good pick.
I I love the precision of picking white.
Yes.
Of the three-color trilogy.
It's an interesting list, and if that is you, you can claim your Amazon movie rental by emailing contact@alternateending.com. Thank you so much, everyone, for listening to this Mondo Marathon episode. You can find us on social media.
This has been a weird one. We thank you for writing it out with us.
It's been delightful.
Thank
you so much for having
me.
me.
For giving us the opportunity. Thank you for Mandy, of course.
Yeah, thank you so much, Mandy. This has been a blast. If you want more episodes of the podcast and everything, all the things that we do, you can go to our Facebook page, like it, go to Twitter where we're tweeting all the time, Instagram, find more of our reviews, Mandy's raspberry picking column, podcast, everything at alternateending.com. Join the Discord page, find our merch, all that stuff is available through the website. Don't forget our Patreon, and that's gonna do it for me, I think.
That's gonna do it. That's gonna do it.
Anyway, yep. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.